Tomorrow marks 3 years since Russia invaded Ukraine and began Europe's deadliest war since World War II. Peace might be in the offing, at least according to Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, but at what cost to Ukraine and Europe? I want to bring in Poland's foreign minister, Radek Sikorski, whose country is Ukraine's neighbor and one of its strongest allies. He joins me from Washington, D.C., where he met with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Friday. Radek Sikorski, welcome to the show. You said after your meeting with Secretary of State Rubio that it was your impression that the United States wanted a lasting peace in Ukraine. Do you mean by that you got assurances that there would be some security guarantees for Ukraine? Because after all, that is what has been the problem. The lasting peace part of it, Russia has invaded in 2014, invaded in 2022, and potentially could invade again.
Ukraine, remember, already has security guarantees under the Budapest Memorandum given back in 1994, I think, in return for what was then the world's third largest nuclear stockpile, which the Ukrainians handed over to Russia. Ukraine also has a border treaty with Russia that guaranteed the border between two countries. And 3 years after the war, after the beginning of the invasion, Ukraine has defended the great bulk of its territory. The best guarantee for Ukraine is the almost million-man army, which is manning the foxholes and heroically resisting Russian aggression. But yes, if we are to have a durable peace, it has to be one that both sides can live with, above all, the victim of aggression.
What do you understand the United States' strategy right now? President Trump is frankly trashing Zelensky, calling him a dictator, saying he has been a very weak negotiator, doesn't really need to be at the negotiation table. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has essentially conceded several of Russia's demands, saying it's unrealistic to expect that Ukraine will get back all its territory, ruled out NATO membership, ruled out U.S. troops in Ukraine. And now the United States is thwarting a UN resolution which says that Russian aggression is to blame for this conflict. What do you think is the strategy here?
I think every new administration always takes a bit of time to find its feet and to assess the full information from intelligence agencies and so on, and is talking to allies, where I was very glad to be able to speak to first General Kellogg, then Marco Rubio, also to the National Security Advisor Waltz. And consultations with allies are good things. But remember, it's Ukraine that decides whether she wants to fight or not. This is, I was in Munich, and you know what happened in Munich in '38. Czechoslovakia was dictated to, but that was because Czechoslovakia wasn't ready to fight alone and didn't have allies. Ukraine is fighting, and rather successfully defeated the Russians at sea, for example, and has allies. We in Europe have said that we will continue to support Ukraine come what may.
Will Poland back the American alternative to the Ukrainian resolution in the General Assembly? The Ukrainian one squarely says Russian aggression caused this conflict. The United States' resolution essentially deletes that sentence and makes no reference to Russian aggression.
We need to call spade a spade. 3 years ago, there was an overwhelming vote in the UN General Assembly condemning the Russian aggression, and this continues to be the case.
When you think about the end of this war, in your view, is it possible that Ukraine can survive and be strong with no guarantees in security terms from either NATO or the European Union? And can the European Union give such guarantees? It's not really a security organization.
Well, Ukraine, remember, has 110 brigades in the field. They've destroyed most of Russia's tanks. They produced 1.5 million drones last year. They are going to produce 4.5 million drones this year. If you'd asked me 3 years ago, where where Ukraine and Russia would be in this war in 3 years' time, I don't think either of us would have guessed that Russia would only capture 20% of Ukraine's territory. And Putin, did you notice yesterday, interesting piece of news, has secretly sold 100 tons of Russia's gold. The Russian economy is getting into trouble. He has thrown everything he has in the last few months with these Pyrrhic victories, sacrificing thousands of soldiers to gain a village or two, precisely for this moment, to put himself in a position where he appears to be stronger than he is. Ukraine can fight on its own with our European support for the rest of this year, and I think Putin has to take this into account.
Stay with us. When we come back, I'm going to ask Radoslaw Sikorski, what does Europe do in a new world where the United States' support cannot be taken for granted? When we come back. And we're back to talk about Russia's war on Ukraine and Europe's response with Poland's Foreign Minister, Radoslaw Sikorski. He joins me from Washington, D.C. Radek, the Financial Times has said that the United States has made a historic move for the first time in 8 decades, effectively, turning its back on its allies, turned on its allies, treating them as adversaries. Friedrich Merz, the man likely to become Chancellor of Germany, says Germany can no longer be sure that America will protect it. Do you worry about the same thing? Can Poland be sure that in the event of a Russian attack on Poland, the United States will come to its defense today?
Well, that's the essence of NATO, and we were there for the United States in Iraq, above all in Afghanistan. We sent a brigade when the United States was attacked. An alliance is a relationship, and yesterday Poland's president spoke to President Trump. I spoke to the National Security Advisor, and nothing has changed in that. We are good allies, and I hope we continue to be. But where we agree with the Trump administration is that some European allies have lagged behind in their readiness. Poland has been spending 2% of GDP on defense for 20 years. We're now at almost 5%, and will continue to do so. The majority of allies have now come up to scratch. We need to do a better job of it, and there is determination to do what is up to us.
Merz even talked about the possibility of Germany having to rely on French and British nuclear protection because he worried that the United States would not actually come through. Do you worry about that? Would you worry about a Germany that decided it needed to take its security into its own hands, given that Poland has been a victim of German aggression over the centuries?
We are good allies with Germany. Germany is our biggest trading partner. But remember, Germany is banned from having nuclear weapons by its unification treaty, and also has a ceiling of, I think, 300,000 troops. But we need a partnership in Europe to deter Putin, to do our bit. And this is happening.
You know, one theory about what Donald Trump is doing is that he's trying to wean the Russians off the Chinese, off their tight alliance with China. Do you think you've traveled extensively to both places? You've been foreign minister for this is your second time around. Do you think it would work?
Well, trying to do a Kissinger in reverse is, of course, a tempting intellectual construct. I think with the current solidarity of dictators between Vladimir Putin and President Xi Jinping, it is unlikely to succeed. Let us do what can be achieved, which is to support Ukraine, to bring Russia to her senses, withdraw from Ukraine, and then we'll have a more peaceful world with a more reasonable Russia and a more reasonable China.
What do you make of the deal that the United States is trying to make with Ukraine to get what I think President Zelensky just said at a news conference, $2 back from Ukraine for every dollar of military aid it has given. Does that strike you? The European Union has actually in total given more aid to Ukraine. Does it strike you as a reasonable ask for the United States to make off Ukraine?
Poland holds the presidency of the EU, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the EU at the Security Council in New York tomorrow. And yes, you're right. By our figures, the United States has contributed just over $100 billion to Ukraine, mostly militarily. Militarily more than Europe, but overall we think we are at about 145. But maybe that means that the US wants to give Ukraine much more support, which then the US believes should be refunded. Maybe this is good news.
Radek Sikorski, you're looking for good news in everything. So let me ask you, if in fact this is a new world, as so many people are predicting, where the United States is withdrawing and countries are going to fend for themselves, will Europe, you think, make greater overtures to China? Is it possible that Europe, diverges from the U.S. policy on China and finds a way to have a working relationship that's much more constructive?
I helped to formulate Europe's policy towards China in my previous role as a member of the European Parliament, and it's in a slogan, collaborate where possible on global issues, compete when needed, plenty of that, and confront when necessary. And I think this is sensible. The transatlantic bargain is that the US helps us to deter Putin. In return, we buy American and we express our solidarity with the US on many international issues, including its competition with China. And the deal obviously works both ways.
Radek Sikorski, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next on GPS, Trump's recent moves at the Justice Department have raised the question, should the president have control over federal prosecutors? What do other countries do? I'll ask an expert after the break.